My dad asked me to fund his medical investment over dinner I paid for, then told me mom would be ashamed if I said no. When I asked him to name a single surgery I'd performed, he went silent. When I asked for one thing he knew about my fiancé, he just laughed and said, "All I know is they're not writing checks." I didn't say a word. That was 6 months ago. This morning, he was crying outside my hospital, clutching the fraud indictment in both hands. I need my dad to love me for who I am, not what I can give him. Growing up, love in our house came with conditions. Straight A's earned a brief "I love you" from dad, always followed by questions about why the A wasn't an A+. Every achievement unlocked affection like a vending machine. Insert success, receive validation. When I scored the winning goal in soccer, his smile lasted exactly 3 seconds before he wondered aloud why I wasn't team captain yet. Mom died when I was 14, brain aneurysm. One morning she was braiding my hair, humming that old Fleetwood Mac song she loved. By dinner, she was gone. The house fell silent except for dad's office door clicking shut and the sound of his fingers on calculator keys late into the night. I became his project. His grief transformed into my schedule. SAT prep at 5 a.m. Volunteer shifts until midnight. If I could just achieve enough, maybe his eyes would soften the way they used to when mom walked into a room. Undergrad nearly broke me. 3 jobs, including the graveyard shift at the campus library. I'd prop my biochemistry textbook against the reception desk, mainlining instant coffee, telling myself that exhaustion was just weakness leaving the body. My roommate found me once, passed out over my organic chemistry notes, nose bleeding from stress. I woke up to her shaking me, my notes ruined with blood. Med school was worse. During my surgery rotation, 36 hours without sleep, the OR lights started spinning. Next thing I knew, IV fluids were dripping into my arm, and my attending was lecturing about self-care while checking my pupils for signs of concussion. I collapsed mid-procedure. Luckily, I didn't crack my skull on the surgical equipment, but I made it. Neurosurgery, the same specialty mom would have needed. At 32, I had everything dad pushed me toward. The prestigious career, the 6-figure salary, the respect of colleagues. Then 6 months ago, something changed. Weekly calls replaced his usual monthly check-ins. His voice carried warmth I hadn't heard since before mom died. No criticism sandwiched between pleasantries. Just pride. I started believing again. Started sharing pieces of my life beyond my CV. Mentioned Max. Mentioned our engagement. The dinner was my idea. Le Bernardin, stupidly expensive, but I wanted to show him how far I'd come. Max noticed my hands trembling as we waited. Their fingers intertwined with mine under the white tablecloth, steadying me. Dad arrived in a suit I'd never seen. Italian cut, designer label visible. He shook Max's hand briefly, eyes already sliding past them to focus on me. His first words weren't congratulations on my engagement. They were about how tired I looked. I tried to redirect, to introduce Max properly, but Dad was already pulling out a leather folder. It was for an investment opportunity. Ground floor, medical supplies company. My stomach recognized the pattern before my heart did. 200,000. He needed it by Friday. The number hung between us like a diagnosis I didn't want to confirm. His pitch continued, guaranteed returns, 30% minimum, insider knowledge. Max's hand tightened around mine as Dad's mask slipped, revealing the desperation underneath his designer facade. When I hesitated, he invoked mom, said she'd be ashamed of my selfishness. I quickly got up saying I had to use the bathroom. The bathroom tiles were cold against my palms as I gripped the sink. Max followed, held me while years of manipulation crystallized into clarity. The timeline clicked into place. Dad's new car 3 months ago, right after his first warm phone call. The Vegas trip 2 months ago, when he started saying he missed me. Each "I love you" perfectly timed with a financial need I hadn't seen coming. When we returned to the table, Dad had rearranged his face into fatherly concern. His performance might have worked 6 months ago. Now I saw the calculation behind every gesture. I told him I'd agree to give him the money if he could answer my question. I asked him to name one surgery I'd performed. When his mouth opened and closed without offering a sound, I asked for one detail about Max, my favorite coffee shop, anything about my life unrelated to my earning potential. His silence said everything. The rehabilitation center had a bed available. I'd called that morning, some part of me already knowing how dinner would end. I put him into a 30-day program for gambling addiction, not his first time. I remembered the foreclosure notice on our door junior year of high school, mom's life insurance money vanishing into poker games while I wore the same shoes until they fell apart. His anger, when it came, felt familiar, ungrateful, selfish. The words he'd used my whole life to sculpt me into something useful. But standing there with Max's steady presence beside me, I finally understood the difference between being loved and being used. My dad was wrong. He didn't make me who I am. I made myself in spite of him. And for the first time, that felt like enough. As we walked away, my phone buzzed, and everything came crashing down. It was a voicemail from an unknown number. "Your father owes us $500,000. Since he can't pay, we're coming to collect from you, doctor. We know where you work." The voicemail continued playing as my hand gripped the phone. The voice was professional, cold, advanced financial services, multiple loans, documentation dating back years. My legs gave out and I sank onto the restaurant's marble steps while Max crouched beside me, their hand on my back. The numbers didn't make sense. $500,000. The oldest loan originated when I was 18, right when Dad co-signed my first student loan paperwork. My hands shook as I fumbled to replay the message. Max pulled out their phone and started recording the voicemail, documenting everything with the same methodical approach they used for their engineering projects. Back in our apartment, I spread every financial document I could find across the kitchen table. Bank statements, credit reports I'd never thought to check, old tax returns. Max sorted them into chronological piles while I dialed Dad's number. He picked up on the third ring, his voice still carrying traces of anger from our dinner confrontation. I kept my voice steady as I mentioned the voicemail. His breathing changed, a sharp intake followed by silence that stretched too long. When I said the words, "identity theft charges," the silence grew heavier. He started talking fast, claiming he only meant to help with my student loans, that I was too young to understand financial planning back then. But his voice cracked when I pressed for details. The admission came in pieces. 5 credit lines opened in my name over the years. He called it investing in my future, said every parent helped their children establish credit. But these weren't authorized user accounts or legitimate co-signed loans. These were accounts I'd never seen, never signed for, never knew existed. My childhood friend Emma arrived within an hour of my call. She'd become a forensic accountant after college, specializing in fraud cases. She set up her laptop on our kitchen table, now buried under documents, and started her analysis. Her face grew more serious with each discovery. The loans dated back 8 years, a trail of financial destruction hidden behind my success. I stared at the photo of mom on the bookshelf while weighing my options. Filing a police report would destroy Dad, but trying to negotiate with creditors privately might leave me drowning in debt I didn't create. Emma's fingers flew across her calculator as she tallied the damage. Max sat beside me, silent support while I grappled with an impossible choice. I decided to investigate fully before taking any legal action. Emma helped me pull records from every financial institution that had ever touched my name. We discovered Dad listed as my financial manager on multiple documents, his signature appearing where mine should have been. The forgeries were good, practiced. He'd been doing this for years. The next morning brought another revelation. The security company that monitored my storage unit called about unusual activity. Their cameras had caught Dad attempting to access my unit at 5 a.m., fumbling with keys in the pre-dawn darkness. The unit contained boxes from Mom's estate, things Dad claimed had no value but I'd kept anyway. I drove to the storage facility with Max. Inside the climate-controlled unit, we found boxes Dad had sworn were destroyed in a basement flood years ago. Mom's medical records, perfectly preserved. Not just preserved, but organized. Meticulously labeled folders with sticky notes in Dad's distinctive handwriting. My stomach turned as I realized what I was looking at. Dad's campaign started that afternoon. My phone rang with a call from my mentor, Dr. Chen. Dad had contacted him, expressing concern about my work schedule, wondering if the stress was affecting my judgment. He'd asked pointed questions about whether mental health issues ran in families, using the same phrases he'd used when Mom got sick. Dr. Chen mentioned Dad seemed particularly interested in our hospital's policies on physician wellness checks. The pattern was starting to emerge. The same words, the same concerns, the same attempts to paint someone as unstable when they wouldn't comply with his needs. Mom's medical files revealed the truth in clinical detail. Dad had refused second opinions when she complained of severe headaches. The records showed him telling doctors she was prone to hypochondria, that she exaggerated symptoms. In the margins of one report, Mom's desperate handwriting pleaded for someone to listen. The headaches were real, the pain was real, but Dad's voice had been louder than hers. My phone buzzed with a text from Aunt Helen. Dad had called her too, spinning the same narrative he'd crafted years ago. She recognized the lies this time. We needed to talk, she said. The family needed to know what was happening. Uncle Jeffrey wasn't as easily convinced when I met him at a coffee shop downtown. He insisted Dad had been devoted to Mom, never left her side during her illness. He couldn't see control disguised as care, couldn't recognize isolation dressed up as protection. But I had Mom's journal now, pulled from those carefully preserved boxes. Her entry from when I was 8 years old made my hands shake. Dad had convinced her she was imagining the headaches. That stress from parenting was making her create symptoms. She wrote about not trusting her own mind anymore, about maybe he was right, maybe she was going crazy. The gaslighting documented in her own handwriting. Dad's reach extended further than I'd imagined. My godmother called, worried about me cracking under pressure like my mother had. Those were Dad's exact words, planted carefully in conversations with anyone who'd listen. The pattern was so clear now, the systematic destruction of credibility before the real damage began. The hospital's HR department scheduled a wellness check meeting for the following week. Dad's concerned calls about my family history of mental instability had triggered their protocols. I sat in my office, staring at the email, recognizing the trap closing around me. Dr. Chen initially dismissed my concerns when I explained what was happening. Parents worried about their children, he said. It was natural for Dad to be concerned, but something in his expression shifted when I mentioned the pattern, and he quietly admitted his own mother had died young after years of being called unstable by his controlling father. I spent hours at the county records office, pulling documents that revealed another horrifying truth. Dad had power of attorney over Mom's medical decisions, but the paperwork showed it had been changed from Mom's sister Helen just 2 months before Mom died. The timing was too convenient, too calculated. Mom's bank statements from her final months told their own story. Large cash withdrawals Dad had explained as payments for alternative treatments, holistic remedies insurance wouldn't cover. But Emma's analysis revealed the truth. The withdrawal dates matched perfectly with Dad's gambling losses. Casino markers called in, poker debts settled. Mom's suffering had funded his addiction. 3 nurses from Mom's final hospital stay remembered her clearly when I tracked them down. They recalled Mom asking repeatedly to call her sister, begging to see Helen. But Dad always had reasons why it would upset her too much, why she needed to focus on getting better without outside stress. The pattern of isolation was documented in their notes, though no one had connected the dots at the time. I recognized Dad's escalation pattern now. The crisis always peaked near Mom's death anniversary, when emotions ran high and defenses were low. Maximum vulnerability meant maximum opportunity for manipulation. This year was no different, except now I could see the machinery behind the performance. Helen's living room became our war room as she revealed more pieces of the puzzle. She'd tried to visit Mom during those final weeks, but Dad had her removed from the hospital, claiming Mom didn't want visitors. Security had escorted her out while Dad played the devoted husband, protecting his wife from stressful family dynamics. Emma's forensic analysis revealed the final piece of Dad's pattern. His gambling losses spiked during family medical emergencies. When chaos provided cover, when everyone focused on illness and treatment, Dad's addiction ran wild. Other people's crises became his opportunities, their vulnerability, his financial gain. The medical board complaint arrived by certified mail. Dad had filed formal concerns about my erratic behavior and family history, attaching documents I'd never seen before. Falsified records suggesting a pattern of mental instability stretching back generations. The lies were elaborate, detailed, almost believable if you didn't know the truth. Dr. Martinez pulled me aside after rounds, his discomfort obvious. He admitted Dad had approached him privately, offering cash in exchange for supporting a mental health intervention. The bribe had been subtle, framed as concern for my well-being, but Martinez recognized it for what it was. He'd refused, but warned me others might not be so ethical. Dad's extended family began receiving carefully worded emails about my supposed breakdown. Each message contained just enough truth mixed with fabrication to seem credible. I discovered this when my cousin forwarded one to me, concerned but skeptical. The email detailed my collapse during surgery residency, twisted into evidence of inherited instability rather than exhaustion from working triple shifts. I gathered the forwarded emails and added them to my growing evidence file. The pattern was methodical. Dad had created a narrative where I was following Mom's path, working myself toward a mental break. He'd even included dates and times that aligned with real events, making the lies harder to disprove. My childhood home stood in foreclosure when I drove past it. The yellow notice taped to the door fluttered in the wind. I parked and walked through the overgrown yard, remembering Mom's garden that Dad had let die after she passed. The house looked abandoned, windows dark, paint peeling. This was where Dad's 3-stage pattern had perfected itself. Inside, using the spare key still hidden under the fake rock, I found chaos. Stacks of unopened mail covered every surface. Foreclosure notices dating back months. Past due bills. Casino loyalty cards scattered across Dad's desk. The refrigerator hummed empty except for expired condiments. This wasn't the home of someone managing investments. My neighbor Mrs. Chen emerged from her house as I loaded boxes into my car. She'd lived next door for 30 years, watched me grow up. She mentioned having old security camera footage from when Mom was sick, offering to check if any might be helpful. Her cameras had captured more than either of us expected. The footage showed Dad loading boxes into his car the same week Mom first complained of severe headaches. Multiple trips, always when I was at school. The timestamp showed this was months before Mom's final hospitalization, before anyone except Mom knew something was wrong. He'd been preparing, hiding evidence before there was officially anything to hide. Max's parents called that evening. They'd received an anonymous letter warning them about my family history of mental instability. The handwriting was Dad's, though he'd tried to disguise it. They saw through the manipulation immediately, recognizing the same controlling patterns they'd escaped in their own families. Their support felt like armor against Dad's attacks. I spent the night at a 24-hour copy center, creating multiple backup sets of mom's medical files. The teenage employee didn't ask questions as I fed page after page through the machine. Each copy went to a different secure location. Emma kept one set, Helen another, Max's parents a third. Dad couldn't destroy what he couldn't find. Credit agencies began their fraud investigation after Emma filed the initial reports. The investigator warned that family identity theft cases faced a higher burden of proof. Courts often assumed family members had implicit permission to use each other's information. Documentation would be critical. Every forged signature, every unauthorized account, every fraudulent transaction needed to be meticulously cataloged. Mom's former colleague Brenda reached out through Helen. She'd worked with Mom at the library before Mom got too sick to continue. Brenda mentioned Mom had been documenting something in the months before she died, keeping notes that she'd asked Brenda to safeguard. We arranged to meet at Brenda's apartment. The recipe box Brenda handed me looked ordinary. Mom's handwriting covered index cards with her famous chocolate chip cookie recipe, her mother's apple pie, but tucked behind the recipes were different cards, dates, times, Dad's lies carefully documented. Mom had been building her own evidence file, tracking his gambling losses against his excuses. Dad's brother Tom called while I was reviewing Mom's notes. His voice carried years of suppressed anger. He revealed what the family had hidden for decades. Their mother, my grandmother, had died under similar circumstances. Dad had convinced everyone she had dementia, isolated her from family, controlled her medical care. The pattern stretched back generations. I met Tom in his car outside a grocery store parking lot. He couldn't risk Dad seeing us together. Tom pulled out old photos, documents he'd saved, their mother's diary entries describing the same confusion Mom had documented, the same gaslighting, the same isolation, the same tragic end with Dad as the devoted son no one questioned. My colleagues began receiving flowers with sympathy cards about my recent breakdown. The florist confirmed they were paid for in cash by an older man matching Dad's description. Each card expressed concern for my mental health, hoping I'd get the help I needed. The campaign to undermine my credibility was escalating. I presented the evidence to my department chair, laying out Dad's pattern of manipulation. My methodical approach, complete with documentation and timelines, countered Dad's emotional appeals. Facts defeated fear-mongering. The chair agreed to disregard any concerns about my mental state unless they came with concrete evidence. The insurance investigator assigned to my identity theft case gave me a deadline, 30 days to file formal fraud charges, or the debt would become legally mine. The clock was ticking. Each day that passed made the financial noose tighter. Dad knew this, was counting on my reluctance to destroy him. Tom revealed more family secrets during our second meeting. Their mother had died alone in a nursing home after Dad convinced the family she was too ill for visitors. This investigation is uncovering such shocking truths about the Dad's history. The way the mom secretly documented his lies in that recipe box shows she knew what was happening but felt so trapped. He'd controlled all communication, interpreting her confusion as aggression, her pleas for help as delusions. The family had trusted his devotion, never questioning why he insisted on being her sole caregiver. Dad's credit report, which Emma obtained through the investigation, showed the full scope of his desperation. Every possible credit avenue had been maxed out. Personal loans, credit cards, even payday lenders. The gambling had consumed everything. He was a cornered animal, and cornered animals did desperate things. During a family meeting at Helen's house, Dad made his next move. He offered to share Mom's life insurance payout, presenting it as a peace offering. The problem was, he told us years ago that Mom's policy had lapsed. Now he admitted collecting $300,000 after her death. The money had funded his gambling for only 2 years before disappearing into casino vaults. Helen confirmed what several family members had suspected. After Mom died, they'd wanted an autopsy to understand how the aneurysm had been missed. Dad had rushed to have her cremated, claiming it was Mom's wish. No one had questioned the grieving widower. Now we understood he'd been destroying evidence. Mom's best friend Linda had saved voicemails from those final months. Mom's voice, weak but clear, saying Dad wouldn't let her see doctors alone, describing how he answered for her during appointments, interpreted her symptoms to match his narrative. The recordings revealed a pattern of coercive control that made my skin crawl. I realized Dad's power had always come from isolation. He'd separated Mom from her support system, made himself the sole filter for information. But I had Max, Emma, Helen, and a growing coalition of family members who saw through his manipulations. His old tactics were failing against our united front. The attic insulation in my childhood home yielded another discovery. Wrapped in plastic, hidden between joists, was Mom's diary. The final entries were damning. She wrote about Dad stealing her symptoms, telling doctors she imagined things. Her last entry, dated a week before her death, was crystal clear. I'm not crazy. He's culling me. Max discovered our wedding fund had been frozen due to the fraud investigation. Instead of anger, they showed only support. We spent quiet evenings planning our legal strategy, their steady presence a counterweight to Dad's chaos. Love without conditions felt revolutionary after a lifetime of transactional affection. Emma suggested draining Dad's accounts in retaliation, using the same tactics he'd employed. I refused. Becoming him to hit him would be another kind of defeat. We would win with truth, documentation, and legal channels. Mom deserved justice, not revenge. I confronted Dad with Mom's diary at a public restaurant, witnesses all around. He claimed Mom had been confused by the headaches. That brain pressure caused paranoia. Then he slipped, mentioning brain tumors before Mom's tumor was ever officially diagnosed. His face went white as he realized what he'd revealed. Hospital records confirmed the timeline. Dad had declined MRI scans 3 times over 8 months. He told doctors Mom was anxious about medical procedures while telling Mom the doctor said tests were unnecessary. The deception was documented in clinical notes, each refusal signed by Dad as her medical power of attorney. Dad's girlfriend Carol found me in the restaurant parking lot after their dinner. She was leaving him after seeing the evidence I'd presented. She admitted he'd been controlling her finances too, had convinced her to add him to her accounts. Another pattern, another victim, another woman saved before it was too late. The family group chat transformed from defending Dad to sharing stories of manipulation. Cousins revealed loans never repaid. Aunts discovered missing jewelry. Uncles recalled investments that vanished. The scope of his deception spread like ripples, each revelation connecting to others. Brenda coordinated with Mom's other friends who'd suspected abuse but had been isolated from each other. Dad had told each of them the others were too busy to visit, had created conflicts between them to prevent communication. Now they compared notes, building a picture of systematic isolation. Dad admitted during a heated phone call that he'd started gambling to cope with Mom's illness, but Emma's timeline proved the gambling predated Mom's symptoms by years. His addiction hadn't been caused by grief. It had caused the grief, had driven him to sacrifice Mom's health for money. The medical board dropped their investigation after I provided evidence of Dad's fraud and manipulation. The falsified documents he'd submitted actually strengthened my case, showing the lengths he'd go to discredit anyone who threatened his control. Truth defeated slander in the end. Family members began changing locks and passwords Dad had access to. His options shrank daily as each relative secured their finances. The network of trust he'd exploited for decades crumbled. Without access to other people's money, his gambling ground to a halt. Linda revealed the most damaging information yet. Mom had secretly met with a divorce lawyer 3 months before her death. She'd been planning to leave Dad, had started documenting his abuse, but Dad discovered the meeting, and Mom's symptoms mysteriously worsened immediately after. The escalation pattern was clear. I spent days ensuring vulnerable family members updated their power of attorney documents. Elderly aunts who'd given Dad access during family emergencies now revoked it. We created a protective network, sharing information to prevent future exploitation. Each person saved was a victory for Mom. 7 family members united to demand Dad account for missing inheritance from our grandmother. The meeting at Aunt Patricia's dining room table felt like a tribunal. Years of financial records spread across the mahogany surface. The missing money totaled more than anyone had imagined. Dad's attempt to claim I was sick like Mom backfired spectacularly. The family recognized his tactics now, saw how he used the same phrases, the same concerned tone, the same attempts to isolate and discredit. His playbook was exposed, its effectiveness destroyed. Patricia caught Dad trying to access her safe during the family meeting. His desperation made him reckless, fumbling with the combination while others were in the bathroom. She photographed him in the act, adding to our evidence file. The image showed a man whose schemes were collapsing. The medical community rallied around me as news of the identity theft spread professionally. Colleagues who'd received Dad's concerned calls now understood the manipulation. Support poured in from unexpected sources. Other doctors who'd faced similar family exploitation. Emma's complete financial audit revealed staggering numbers. Dad had stolen over $800,000 from family members over 20 years. Combined with the $500,000 in fraudulent loans in my name, the total exceeded $1.3 million. The scope was breathtaking. The insurance deadline loomed. Each day brought the decision closer. File charges and destroy Dad, or absorb the debt and let him continue his patterns. The choice felt impossible until I remembered Mom's diary, her final entries begging for someone to believe her. Dad's ex-wife Catherine emerged from years of silence. She'd left when he started calling her crazy, had recognized the gaslighting before it could escalate. Mom hadn't been so lucky, had been too isolated by the time she realized the danger. Catherine's survival story strengthened my resolve. I realized saving others from Dad mattered more than preserving his reputation or maintaining family peace. His patterns would continue, would claim new victims, unless someone stopped him. Mom couldn't protect herself, but I could protect others. Instead of negotiating privately, I organized a family intervention. Every victim gathered in Helen's living room, their evidence compiled into a comprehensive case. The collective truth was more powerful than any individual accusation. Dad couldn't dismiss all of us as unstable. The extended family created a united front. No more access to anyone's finances. No more medical power of attorney. No more unsupervised visits with vulnerable relatives. The boundaries were firm, enforced by the group rather than individuals he could isolate and manipulate. Mom's neurologist, now retired, agreed to meet at a coffee shop near the hospital. He admitted Dad had refused treatment options, had insisted on watching and waiting despite clear symptoms. The doctor's professional opinion confirmed what Mom's diary claimed. Treatment had been available. Dad had declined it. The family agreed to support my identity theft case. Their backing meant everything, transforming a personal battle into collective justice. We would face the consequences together, would weather any scandal as a united front. Dad's isolation tactics had failed completely. Dad showed up at my workplace demanding I stop the witch hunt. Security cameras captured his meltdown, his threats, his admission that he'd done what was necessary to survive. Max recorded everything on their phone, adding to our evidence file. His public unraveling was documented in high definition. Dad's siblings forced him to sign a fraud confession in exchange for not pressing charges themselves. The document detailed every loan, every forged signature, every stolen inheritance. His hand shook as he signed, finally cornered by consequences he couldn't manipulate away. Tom kept the original while Patricia made copies for each family member. The healing process started slowly at first. Family members who hadn't spoken in years began reconnecting, sharing stories Dad had used to keep them apart. Each conversation revealed another layer of his manipulation, another wedge he'd driven between people who should have supported each other. This family coming together like this is very satisfying, and then uniting against the Dad's manipulation after years of being isolated from each other. Wow. A support group for financial abuse victims welcomed me during their Thursday evening meeting. The facilitator explained that family fraud was more common than most people realized. Around the circle, others shared similar stories of parents, siblings, children who'd exploited trust for money. Their patterns matched Dad's so closely it felt like reading from the same script. Emma's final audit package documented everything meticulously. The evidence showed Dad's fraud totaling $1.3 million over 2 decades, $500,000 in my name through identity theft, $300,000 from Mom's life insurance he'd hidden, another $500,000 stolen from various family members through forged documents and manipulated inheritances. The numbers were staggering, but the human cost was worse. Dad's former poker buddy Sebastian reached out through Tom. He revealed that Dad had bragged about managing Mom's illness to maximize the life insurance payout. The conversation had happened at a casino table. Dad hammered on whiskey and winning streak adrenaline. Sebastian had been disturbed enough to stop playing with him after that night. While organizing Mom's remaining belongings, I discovered veterinary records in a shoebox. The documents showed Dad had Mom's cat euthanized while she was hospitalized for what would be her final stay. He told her the cat ran away. Mom had loved that orange tabby, had asked about him constantly during her last days. Another cruelty documented in clinical paperwork. Mom's diary revealed an entry from 6 months before her death that changed everything. She'd written about recording videos on Linda's computer because she didn't trust Dad not to find them at home. The entry ended with instructions to check the tea tin on Linda's bookshelf if something happened to her. My hands trembled as I dialed Linda's number. Linda's apartment smelled like the lavender tea Mom had loved. The tin sat exactly where Mom's diary indicated, dusty but undisturbed. Inside, wrapped in plastic, was a USB drive. Linda admitted she'd known it was there but had been too afraid to look, worried about what truths it might contain. The USB held 23 video files, each dated and labeled in Mom's careful system. I gathered the family at Helen's house to watch them together. Max set up the laptop while Helen distributed boxes of tissues, somehow knowing we'd need them. Emma sat ready to document anything legally significant. Mom appeared on screen, thinner than I remembered, dark circles under her eyes, but her voice was clear, determined. She documented Dad's refusal to take her to appointments, his insistence that her symptoms were psychological. She showed bills for medical consultations he'd canceled. She described his anger when she'd tried to call Helen. Each video built the case she knew she might need posthumously. Dad's response was predictable when word reached him about the videos. He claimed they proved Mom was mentally ill, that her paranoia was evidence of the brain tumor affecting her judgment. But the medical timeline Emma had constructed proved Mom recorded the videos before any tumor was detected, when Dad was still insisting nothing was wrong. I discovered more evidence in Dad's own files. He told the hospital Mom was refusing treatment, while telling Mom the doctor said nothing could be done. The deception was documented in conflicting forms he'd signed, some claiming Mom declined intervention, others requesting comfort care only. He'd played both sides to ensure the outcome he needed. Some family members began wavering as the reality of criminal prosecution loomed. They feared scandal, worried about their own reputations if Dad's crimes became public. The unity we'd built started showing cracks. Uncle Jeffrey pulled me aside, suggesting we handle everything privately to protect the family name. The fractures widened during a tense meeting at Patricia's house. Half the family wanted to proceed with charges while others pushed for a quiet settlement. Dad had found his opening, was working the phones from his apartment, reminding relatives of their own secrets, their own vulnerabilities. The master manipulator still had some moves left. I faced the legal proceedings increasingly alone as relatives distanced themselves. The detective assigned to the case warned me this was common in family fraud situations. The closer the betrayal, the harder it was for people to maintain their resolve. Max and Emma remained steadfast, but the family coalition was crumbling. The decision crystallized during a sleepless night reviewing Mom's videos. In one, she looked directly at the camera and said she knew I'd be the one watching someday. She asked me to be brave, to do what she couldn't. Justice for her mattered more than family comfort or maintaining false peace. Filing the formal charges triggered an avalanche. Dad's financial house of cards collapsed as each creditor learned about the others. His apartment landlord discovered the eviction notices from 3 previous residences. His employer found out about the embezzlement investigation from his last job. Every lie unraveled simultaneously. Dad arranged a meeting at Mom's grave, claiming he wanted to explain everything without lawyers present. I agreed, but took precautions. The wire Emma's investigator friend provided was tiny, easily hidden under my jacket. Max parked within sight but out of earshot, ready to intervene if needed. Standing at Mom's headstone, Dad's mask finally dropped completely. He admitted withholding treatment but insisted Mom would have suffered more with intervention. His twisted logic painted himself as merciful, saving her from painful procedures. Then came the real confession. He'd needed Mom's death to occur before the divorce proceedings she'd started could divide their assets. The life insurance wouldn't have been his if they'd divorced. I kept my face neutral as Dad detailed his calculations. Mom's death had to happen within a specific window to maximize the payout while avoiding scrutiny. He'd researched how long someone could survive with her condition untreated. He'd timed everything perfectly, he said, proud of his planning. The confession was still flowing when I revealed the wire. Dad's face went through several expressions before settling on resignation. He'd been so desperate to justify himself that he'd forgotten I might be recording. The unmarked police cars that had been waiting nearby pulled into the cemetery drive. Detective Catherine, who'd been investigating Dad's fraud patterns for months after another victim came forward, took custody of the recording. She explained they'd been building a case but needed more evidence. My documentation had provided crucial pieces, but Dad's confession was the cornerstone they'd been hoping for. The choice between testifying for the murder investigation or letting him face only fraud charges wasn't really a choice at all. Mom deserved the full truth exposed. I agreed to provide complete testimony, knowing it meant destroying any chance of family reconciliation with those who still defended him. Dad's arrest made the local news exactly once. A small item about financial fraud and elder abuse, no names mentioned due to ongoing investigation. The story that had consumed my life for months was reduced to 3 paragraphs on page 6. Somehow that felt right. Not every tragedy needed to be spectacular. Most played out quietly, destroying lives without fanfare. I provided prosecutors with Mom's complete medical documentation, her videos, the evidence of Dad's patterns spanning decades. The case file grew thick with proof of systematic abuse, financial exploitation, and ultimately murder by medical neglect. Each document was another nail in the coffin of Dad's fabricated devotion. Dad tried one final manipulation during a pretrial hearing. He claimed I'd driven him to desperation with my success, that my achievements had made him feel worthless. The prosecutor shut down that narrative quickly with evidence of his gambling addiction predating my birth. His patterns existed long before I could have influenced them. The restraining order I secured brought the first real peace I'd felt in months. Knowing Dad couldn't approach my home, my work, or contact me directly lifted a weight I hadn't realized I'd been carrying. Freedom tasted like safety, like breathing room, like space to heal. Dad eventually accepted a plea deal for fraud to avoid a murder trial. 8 years in minimum security, with possibility of parole in 5. The detective explained this was actually a good outcome. Elder abuse cases were notoriously difficult to prosecute. The fraud charges were solid, provable. Justice didn't always look like maximum punishment. Mom's proper memorial service brought together family members who'd been divided by the legal proceedings. Without Dad's presence, without his manipulation, people began reconnecting authentically. Stories about Mom emerged that I'd never heard, memories Dad had suppressed or twisted. She came alive again through their words. I established a scholarship fund in Mom's name for medical students from families affected by financial abuse. The first recipient was a young woman whose father had drained her college savings for gambling debts. She reminded me of myself at that age, determined to succeed despite family dysfunction. Mom's final video message was dated just 2 weeks before her death. She looked directly at the camera, speaking to me across the years. She knew Dad would try to break me like he'd broken her, but she believed I was stronger than both of them. Her faith in me, preserved digitally, became my anchor. 1 year later, I performed a craniotomy on a patient with the exact type of tumor Mom had developed. The surgery went flawlessly. The patient recovered completely. Each successful procedure was a small victory for Mom, proof that treatment could have saved her. Dad served his 3rd year while I saved lives he'd been willing to sacrifice. My credit slowly rebuilt as the fraudulent accounts were removed. Max and I married in a tiny ceremony in Helen's backyard, exactly the kind of simple gathering Mom would have loved. Her photo sat on the memory table, surrounded by white roses she'd grown in her garden before Dad let it die. My office now displays Mom's picture prominently. Patients often comment on our resemblance, noting her kind eyes. I tell them she was my inspiration for becoming a doctor. The fuller truth stays private, but her legacy lives in every patient I treat, every family I help navigate medical crises without exploitation. Dad sends letters sometimes, forwarded through his lawyer since direct contact violates the restraining order. I don't read them. Emma files them unopened in case they're needed for future legal proceedings. His words have no power anymore. Mom's videos said everything that mattered. Love shouldn't hurt. It just took me 20 years to learn the lesson she died trying to teach. Honestly, this doctor is living proof that we can break free from bad patterns and create something beautiful. Subscribe for more content just like this.